We're so pleased to have you with us this evening as we discuss the county budget priorities for fiscal year 2024-25. This forum is an opportunity for you, the public, to learn about the strategic priorities for the coming fiscal year. Your participation is crucial, and we appreciate your interest in these important discussions. Tonight's presentation is also available in Spanish.
Hay interpretación simultánea en español. Si desea escuchar la transmisión en español, puede seleccionar el icon que se llama interpretación y ahí puede llegar al cuarto donde está Diego Celis y también Ana, quienes les van a ayudar a la interpretación en español. Por favor, hagan eso y por eso es que no los podemos escuchar porque ellos están en ese otro cuarto. Así que por favor, hagan esa seleccionen el mundo que se llama interpretación y esto los llevará al canal de español, donde Diego y Ana les podrán traducir simultáneamente lo que está pasando en la Junta. Muchas gracias.
Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the chair of the County of Monterey Board of Supervisors, Glenn Church, who will provide us some opening remarks about tonight's forum. Welcome, Supervisor Church.
Well, thank you, Nick, and good evening to everyone. So tonight, Monterey County is holding an educational forum on the county's budget priorities and its financial challenges for the future. While the county provides services for all residents, such as social services and health programs, it has a far larger role to play for those who live in the unincorporated areas. Just as our cities must pave streets, provide police officers, pick up litter, and maintain parks and libraries, so must the county pave roads, provide sheriff patrols, clean up illegal dumping, and maintain parks and libraries in unincorporated Monterey County. The large size and vast distances of Monterey County makes providing those services a real challenge at times. In June, the Board of Supervisors approved placing Measure AA on the ballot for the November ballot. If passed, it will increase the sales tax in unincorporated Monterey County by 1% and make it comparable to the sales tax rates in our cities and neighboring counties. Monterey County's unincorporated currently has the lowest sales tax rate compared to those areas. Because the sales tax only affects unincorporated residents, only unincorporated voters can vote on it. Voters who live in the cities will not be able to vote on this measure. The Board of Supervisors also directed that these sales tax revenues should stay for services in unincorporated Monterey County. And although these revenues will go into the general fund, a special account will be created so that those revenues can be transparent and tracked for that purpose. As you see on the screen now are the 5 budget priorities that the Board of Supervisors adopted in September. One of them is road repair and infrastructure projects. And this is basically to fix, maintain, and improve our transportation and critical public facilities. We have some $700 million in road repairs alone that are needed. There's water and sewer infrastructure. Maintaining both the quality and quantity of a safe, reliable, sustainable water supply is a priority in the years ahead. We have parks projects. Our county parks are a major source of recreation for all residents and need 15 to 30 million in badly needed maintenance. Essential and mandated services. Challenges such as homelessness, healthcare needs, services for our youth and seniors are necessary throughout unincorporated Monterey County. Public safety. This includes everything from putting more deputies and animal control officers in our communities to maintaining our emergency communication services and disaster response network. So thank you for now, and I'll turn it back to Nick for the rest of the presentations.
Well, thank you, Chair Church. We certainly appreciate those opening remarks, and we appreciate you framing the important topics that are going to be discussed tonight. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome our County Administrative Officer sitting to my left, Ms. Sonia De La Rosa, who will provide a few remarks before we dive deeper into these subjects tonight. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us this evening. What a great opportunity for us to be able to share with all of you a little bit about what the county does and ways in which you can help us certainly improve the way we provide services and perhaps even expand the way we provide services in the community. With your input, we will only become better. And so we want to use this as an opportunity both to share about what we do in the county, but also to learn from you as to where we could potentially take our services into the future. We have a staff of over 5,000 employees in the county of Monterey that stand ready to assist you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and I'll be joining you again in just a bit.
Well, thank you, Sonia. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight. Now I'd like to take a few moments to introduce the key staff who will be making presentations tonight. Our presenters include our Sheriff Coroner, Tina Nieto, our Assistant County Administrative Officer, Ezekiel Vega, our Director of Public Works, Facilities and Parks, Randy Ishii, our Chief of Parks, Brian Flores, our Director of Emergency Management, Kelsey Scanlon, and our Director of Emergency Communications 911, Leanne Magoski. This evening's agenda will begin with an overview of the county's budget, followed by presentations on these specific priority areas. We will also have a question and answer period where you can submit questions using the question and answer feature on this Zoom session. We will address those questions at the end of the presentation. And again, just as a reminder for anybody who has joined us late, there is Spanish interpretation available on this Zoom program. Now let's begin with an overview of the county budget. I'd like to introduce Ezekiel Vega, our Assistant County Administrative Officer, who will walk us through the numbers. Ezekiel, welcome to tonight's forum.
Thank you, Mr. Pasculi. I really appreciate that introduction. So, Karina, can you please go ahead and share the screen with the presentation? Thank you for that, Karina. You could go to the second slide. And what I want to do is thank you for attending this forum. And what I wanted to do is provide a framework for you to have the opportunity to understand how the budget process works and also where the majority of the funding is currently allocated for the county itself. On this slide that you see in front of you, you could actually see a lot of arrows and circles, squares, that actually gives you information as to how the budget process works for the county, when it starts, and how that is developed over the course of approximately 7 to 8 months. Typically, we start this process by developing a forecast that starts in November, so we're almost upon that process. We're going to start next month in developing the forecast for next fiscal year. That information is critical for the Board of Supervisors to start making early decisions about the allocation of resources. As Supervisor Church alluded to earlier, the Board of Supervisors adopted budget priorities so that if any new funding is available going forward into next fiscal year, we will be able to use those priorities as part of the decision making that the Board of Supervisors will have to make as part of the budget process. And then in the next slide, you are able to see the results of what that process culminated into for fiscal year 24-25. We went into a process like the one that was described previously, and overall, the county's budget was allocated into these different resources. I want to make a distinction that this is the overall county budget of approximately $2 billion. That's the overall size of the budget. And as you can see from this slide, the general fund is a big component of that, approximately $886 million of that. The other funds that you see also on the slide include Natividad Medical Center, which provides important services to the community, and also the Behavioral Health Fund that provides important behavioral health services to the community as well. But the majority of the services that are provided to the community outside of those two other funds are provided in the general fund. And as you will see in the next slide, you'll see a breakdown of those services that are provided in the general fund. And as you can see from this slide, the majority of those services, important services, are being provided in the Department of Social Services for approximately $267.9 million. And then the next larger service department area is the Sheriff's Department, along with the Health Department. So as those budget priorities are being adopted and the budget is being developed, this is how the allocation throughout the years has been made to these different funds. And some of the allocations that you will see here are not necessarily discretionary to the Board of Supervisors. I wanted to make that very clear as well. A lot of the funds that are received, for example, in social services and in the health department, Those are what we call program revenue. As an example, when the health department provides services to the community in a clinic setting, if they go to primary care clinics, they provide services that are specifically funded by revenue that those clinics receive directly from the fees paid by the insurance company, by medical and other funding sources. So a lot of this revenue that you see here in the general fund is not necessarily discretionary. The amount of discretionary revenue that the Board of Supervisors receive is approximately $300 million out of the $886 million. And you will see that in a following slide. But in the next one, after this slide, you could see a different breakdown on how your dollars typically are distributed on the different taxes that you pay as a member of this community and how they are broken down into different categories. I think that the more meaningful slide is the one that we saw before, but you have this slide here in front of you so that you could also reference to it as you move forward into your education process about learning about the budget. You could go to the next slide, please, Karina. You will see that as part of that process, as we were looking at the budget for fiscal year 24-25, we had identified several challenges in continuing to provide services in the general fund. The focus in the remaining slides will be in the general fund because, as indicated before, that's where the Board of Supervisors has the most discretion on how to use those funds. And also because it is one of the ones that provides the most services to the community, the important services that you depend on a day-to-day basis. As you see on this table, we were facing challenges of potential deficits into the current fiscal year and also in the upcoming fiscal years. As we have worked throughout the process of the budget process throughout the last few months, we actually were able to resolve the deficit for fiscal year 24-25 and adopted a balanced budget. In addition to that, we have also refined our estimate for fiscal year 25-26, and currently we estimate that we could potentially face a deficit estimated at $20 million for fiscal year 25-26. As we go into the process for fiscal year 25-26, we will be able to refine and provide a new estimate to the Board of Supervisors so they could make informed decisions as we move into the budget for the fiscal year 25-26. And then on the next slide, Karina, you could see that this is what I was alluding to earlier. When you're looking at the general fund itself, you could see that revenues in the general fund continue to grow. But unfortunately, the expenditures are growing at a much faster pace than these revenues are growing. And when you look at the portion of this on this chart, that is, you see that orange line, that is the portion of discretionary revenue out of the total $800 million of total revenue in the general fund. So approximately 1/3 or so of the total revenue in the general fund is what is called discretionary and where the Board of Supervisors has more discretion. So if new funding is available in the general fund into the future, that will add to that portion of the discretionary revenue that you see there. And then the board will have more discretion as to how to potentially direct those funds to be spent into the future. So with that concludes my presentation. I know it's very quick and short, but I just wanted to make sure that you had the highlights as to how the budget works. And I'll be glad to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vega, for that budget overview. We certainly appreciate you going into that depth, and it's very informative for everyone, I know. Now we'll move to our presentations on the county budget priorities. Let's start with public safety, and I'd like to invite our Sheriff Coroner, Tina Nieto, to kick things off. Tina, welcome this evening.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to the public that's watching. With me tonight, I also have my Undersheriff, Keith Boyd, to talk about specific budget stuff. But since this is an educational format, I just want to remind the public that's watching the statement of the Sheriff's Office before we get in the budget. The Sheriff's Office is actually the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for your county, and it's actually established by the California Constitution, Article 11, Section 1, Subdivision B, and by statute, by California, our Government Code Section 24000. The sheriff is charged with preserving the peace, enforcing criminal statutes, investigating known or suspected criminal activity, and we're charged by statute to duly serve various forms of civil process and to operate the county jail. In addition to that, in this county, the sheriff is also the coroner, and our coroner's duties are defined by California Government Code section. It starts with section 27400. So you can see that the The Sheriff's Office is a multifaceted law enforcement service agency that is governed by statute, that the California Constitution says that these are the things that the Sheriff's Office shall do. Can you move to slide 2, please? So to summarize our priorities, looking at the budget, our budget priorities, obviously the number one priority is the Hernandez settlement. This is a federal settlement that's been in the works, and it's been in the papers quite a bit. So and that's what really guides what we do within the county jail. In addition to that, we have Enforcement Operations Bureau, which provides general patrol services, investigative services, specialized unit services, and also we work with our partners, Kelsey Scanlon over at the Office of Emergency, or the Department of Emergency Management, working on emergency response to critical incidents and natural disasters. Next slide, please. Under the Correction Operations Bureau, and why this is a priority, the Hernandez settlement started in 2015. The settlement is costing the taxpayers $1 million per year in oversight fees. These are fees that don't go into the incarcerated people. These are fees that go into monitors, that go for legal fees, and just managing this settlement. In December 22, at the end of December 22, when I came into office, we were at about an 8% resolution of action items that we have to meet in order not to cost the taxpayers over $1 million a year. In less than 22 months, we were able to bring our resolution to about 40% of the action items that the settlement has asked us. That's a 32% that we've gained in resolution. And the percentages, if you're a math person, is obviously very high. Going to corrections, the corrections priority is to obviously to resolve the Hernandez settlement in order to save money for the taxpayers. And in order to do that, we had to ask for staffing from the Board of Supervisors. And thank you, Board of Supervisors, for that, because under the old budget, they did increase our compliance unit. And just to let the public know, currently we have 13 deputies in jail training and 28 at the academy. These 41 will add a projected 82,000 plus staff hours to the jail over the next month. What the public needs to understand is that if we are not filling these positions, the Hernandez settlement by the courts force us to mandate overtime for the jails that are currently working. Again, we increased our compliance division back in 2023. The Board of Supervisors allowed us to add 1 commander, 2 sergeants, 1 management analyst, and 1 office assistant. Obviously, to get out of this or to meet the compliance needs, we have asked the board for additional personnel, but that is a board decision. Can you move to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. And mine might be delayed because I'm out of town right now. So in our Enforcement Bureau, the staff levels and corrections impact service levels and enforcement. Again, the Hernandez settlement dictates operations throughout our entire agency because the courts have said you shall staff certain amount of people, and any vacancies that occur anywhere in our agency are going to affect the Hernandez settlement and are directly going to affect our Enforcement Bureau. The reduced sworn vacancies from approximately 27 in December 22 to we were able to go to 0 vacancies, and that has led to an increased level of deputies now in Patrol Division, and that is thanks to the great team that I have at the Monterey County Sheriff's Office that worked with our county HR in order to fill these positions to get to the 0 vacancies. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Staffing, any reduction in staffing impacts our county. Our county is 3,800 square miles. And countywide, there's usually only 8 deputies on duty countywide, plus 1 sergeant. For any county of our size, that is a very lean county. We've been operating like that for decades in this county. And again, this has to do with the Hernandez settlement and the courts dictating where our personnel shall go. You can see on this slide that we have 2 deputies in South County Station, 2 in Coastal Station, and usually 4 in Central Station. And they can respond to any place in the county should we have to send deputies that way. Next slide, please. And the enforcement section, what enforcement does that the taxpayers need to understand is that enforcement runs all the investigative services. This includes all the violent crimes, the property crimes, cannabis, auto theft, the coroner's office. We also have specialized units that cover the entire county. So not only does the county have to do the coroner stuff, law enforcement, but we provide the SWAT team, we provide the bomb unit. By government code, we are the search and rescue for the county, the dive team, and we also provide air operations. Not all law enforcement agencies do that. That is your county sheriffs that have those responsibilities based on the California Constitution and California Code. In addition to that, we are the primary responders to any emergency response to critical incidents and natural disasters. We saw that 2 years ago with all the flooding that we had in the county and the Power incident. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my undersheriff real quick. If you have any brief things, Chief Boyd or Undersheriff Boyd, that you'd like to add.
No, Sheriff, it's a team effort countywide. The county's staff across all the departments and offices work in collaboration with your board for the public to ensure that the county is represented. And as noted, Sheriff, reduction in funding impacts our ability to deliver all the services that you've discussed. And that could impact the community's long-term public safety. And so I think we covered it pretty good.
All right, with that, I'd like to introduce Kelsey Scanlon. She is the Director of Emergency Management. Also, I want to apologize to those who are watching. I do have to step away. I do have meetings this evening. I'm out of town on business with my undersheriff. So thank you, Supervisor Church, and thank you to the rest of the county team.
Right. Thank you, Sheriff, and welcome, Kelsey.
Hello, thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Kelsey Scanlon. I'm the Director of Emergency Management. Thank you. For the Monterey County Department of Emergency Management. Our agency is charged with preparing the community for natural, man-made, and technological disasters. We are also charged with the responsibility of preparing the unincorporated agencies as well as our municipal subdivisions in their ability to respond to emergencies. We are also the agency authority on recovery activities, whether they be in the public infrastructure areas or as well as the residential and business recovery. We are also responsible for mitigation planning and overall long-term risk reduction. As with every department here today, we can't do this alone. We very much partner with all the agencies here on this call and leverage each other's resources to effectively manage and respond to disasters and ensure that community services are readily available for disaster victims as soon as possible. This slide is a really great demonstration of the increase of frequency and impact of disasters in the Monterey County operational area. Over the past 7 years, we've had 7 federal disasters. And by that, we mean we've had at least 7 disasters that resulted in enough damage that would result in a gubernatorial declaration. Of course, we've had many more than just these 7, but these are 7 very significant and impactful disasters that have had lasting effect, not just on public infrastructure and not just the county budget, but our residents and businesses as well. Throughout each of these emergencies, the Monterey County Department of Emergency Management is responsible for operating the Emergency Operations Center, which is a collection of agencies that coordinate and collaborate on how best to overcome some really significant challenges and on how best to acquire resources and share those with the community and to provide direct community service to reduce overall suffering, reduce economic losses, protect lives and property, obviously not in that order, and overall to serve as the lead emergency management agency in the Monterey County area. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we are looking at long-term, in addition to creating a very fundamental emergency management program that is able to respond effectively and leverage federal, state, and local resources in a timely and efficient manner, we are looking at some really exciting and innovative projects in the area that I think are whole community and all encompassing in that we look at a spherical perspective and approach to increasing community resilience. And so some of the things that we're looking at doing are increasing our direct services in the community during a disaster. A perfect example are temporary evacuation centers, emergency shelters, commodity distribution, as well as enhancing our public information, specifically through the emergency alert and warning system, and ensuring people have information to make critical decisions about their life and safety, and having as much information that they need to do so. Developing somewhat bespoke disaster recovery services specifically for individuals and households in terms of financial cost recovery. We're looking at doing more direct education into the schools in terms of youth preparedness and teaching at a young age what it means to be resilient, not just day to day, but also during disasters, essentially inciting a cultural paradigm shift of disaster preparedness. We're looking at reducing the overall risk to residential structures by implementing mitigation strategies on private property at a reduced cost for the property owner, which is great for the property owner, increases resilience, reduces potential losses, likely reduces overall insurance premiums. And then ultimately, we're looking at expanding our community response team program so that everyone is empowered in knowledge, skill, and ability to not just help themselves, but help their neighbors in their community. We're really excited about all of these initiatives and hope that not only does it reduce the overall impact on the community and increase resilience, but overall reduce the impact on our budget. There's a super fun statistic that FEMA has put out. For every $7 of mitigation that we invest, we save, other way around. For every $1 that we invest in mitigation, we save $7 in response. So we're really excited about these and look forward to the coming years as these programs roll out. Oh, sorry. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague across the hall is Leanne Magoski, our director for the Monterey County Emergency Communications Department.
Thank you, Kelsey. And if we could get those slides up. For those of you that are not familiar with emergency communications, we're also affectionately referred to as the 911 department. As the director here, I do really want to explain that we provide 911 non-emergency call answering, law enforcement, fire protection, and emergency medical dispatch services for over 30 public safety agencies for the community. So it's a lot more than just 911, but likely if you have called 911 in this county, you've either talked to a dispatcher here in our department, or you've probably talked to CHP. But if it's been more than just traffic, you've probably interacted with one of our dispatchers. When we talk about budget priorities for a 911 department, it really comes down to positions. So currently we have 56 dispatcher positions, 9 shift supervisors, and 10 administrative positions. And that's everything to manage all of our technical systems into all of the management that can handle it for 24/7 operations. Next slide, please. One of the things that's very important to understand about the things that those budgeted positions provide is looking at what we did last year in 2023. So on average, if you can see on the left side of your screen, on a daily average, the dispatchers here take 1,964 calls a day, with a majority of those being non-emergency calls, but a great portion of those also 911 emergency calls and 10-digit emergency calls. That results in events generated into our computer-aided dispatch or CAD system. And on a daily average, we are creating 1,076 law events for all of the public safety agencies, 156 fire events, and 128 medical events on a daily basis for an average in 2023. We are something that people often don't think about, but want it to be there when they have that emergency. And so a few information so that you can share and know information is that we do all of this work that I just talked about, primarily from a 24 station center here across from the Department of Emergency Management. And we also have a 12-seat backup center where primarily our EMS dispatch is provided. That means at any given time in this county, there are 12 to 18 dispatchers working 24/7, 365 days a year. And that includes the consistent monitoring of 6 law channels and 3 fire channels. Some information to know about 911 is, depending on where you're at, you're either going to be speaking with the California Highway Patrol, Carmel Police, or Monterey County when dialing 911. Due to road noises and the quality of the connection, it may be difficult for the dispatcher to hear you, especially if it's a road event. So please be patient and answer the questions. And we constantly do try to improve things, but as everybody knows here in the county, we're only as good as our connectivity with our cellular carriers. If you don't know where you're at, which we do hope you do know where you're at, we can locate you generally using some third-party applications, especially if you're using a smartphone. And this is a reminder that in this county, you can absolutely text 911, but if you haven't heard it before, please call if you can, but text if you can't. In order to deal with the 1,900 calls a day that we receive, we introduced an AI bot and a product called Spark this year that has allowed our non-emergency call volume to be reduced by 30 to 35% each month. This means that dispatchers can spend more time focusing on emergencies, both on the radio and on the phone. Next slide, please. One of the things when we talk about budget priorities and why our positions are so important is our ongoing recruitment and training. It is a process to be selected as an emergency communications dispatcher. So you have to go through a pretty intensive application, computer testing, interview, background, and medical and psychological testing to just be hired. We run academies every 2 months, and that consists of 1 month of classroom, 3 to 4 months of training in a live environment for phones. And then we give you about 2 months time to breathe and just practice phones. And then you have another 4 to 5 months of radio training, learning to do those different radio channels while simultaneously still sometimes answering phones. So when I refer to that AI bot, that's why we're very thankful for that AI bot so that we can focus on those radios and those emergencies. And then the promotion time it takes to get to that journey level dispatcher, and I apologize for the error in the slide. It says average training time promotion. It should say 12 months, not 1 month. I certainly wish it was 1 month. But we currently have 11 in training. We still are hiring for those that may be interested, and we have a current vacancy rate of 19%. We are here for you in your worst times, and we will continue to be here. And thank you very much. And I will return this to Nick.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate all the work that our public service agencies are doing here in the county. And we want to thank you guys for your time this evening and stick around because we'll have some questions for you at the end. Next, we'll hear about road repair and infrastructure. I'd like to invite Randy Ishii, the Director of Public Works, Facilities, and Parks to speak. Welcome, Randy, to the forum this evening.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. As Ms. Bakanovich brings up our PowerPoint presentation, it lends itself to a brief about the department. The department has the staff who maintain the county's roads through the county road crews, the maintenance crews that is, engineering staff who design the drawing plans, the construction specifications, and oversee construction contractors for contracted work. It also contains the county surveyor's office, traffic engineering, as well as special districts. Our facility side maintain all the county's buildings and grounds. And in brief, and whom I'll introduce shortly, is our parks chief, Brian Flores, who oversees all the county's parks from the North County, including Royal Oaks Park, all the way to the recreational lake facilities in the South County. In this exhibit before you, it represents the county and one of our recent condition assessments of all the county's roads. The takeaway from here is you see in the lower right-hand corner is the gradation of the pavement condition index, which we will talk about in a moment. And the key point to extract from this is that red and yellow are not so good. So moving on from this recent pavement inspection, we'll go to the next slide to show you the pavement condition index. In brief, this is an industry standard methodology of assessing the roads, which is used by many public works agencies. It's a scale from 0 to 100, where 100 means that it's a brand new repaved road, and 0 means a fully deteriorated road, leaving only the gravel along the road and very little pavement in and of itself. There is a gradation system, as mentioned. The things that we look for when we do the inspections are at the top of the slide, bullet pointed out, ranging from alligator cracking to block cracking and the various kinds of cracks and defects that you see in a road. Those all have a score associated with them. And again, the lower the number, the more severe the defects in the roadway are. If you took all the county's roads and did an average of all the county's roads, we are at approximately a 45 out of 100, which would put it in that yellow category of poor. And again, that's the county-wide average of all the county's paved roads. Moving on to the next slide. Explains and shows that asset inventory of county transportation infrastructure. The county has 1,260 miles plus minus of county maintained roads. If you think about it, if you took each of the county's roads and put them end on end with each other and stretch them out, that would get you approximately 1/3 of the way across the United States in the east-west direction. On top of those 1,260 plus minus miles of county maintained roads, there are 175 county maintained bridges. All those are associated with a deferred maintenance cost. As time has progressed, as age has occurred, and with the lack of ability to be able to keep up with all of the deferred maintenance, the deferred maintenance for the roads is approximately $700 million. For the county's bridges, it's approximately $300 million. And then there's the road appurtenances in that road right-of-way. And those are things such as the stop signs, the stop ahead signs, the pavement that you, delineation or striping that you see on the road, all the traffic signals, all of those have a cost. And that's approximately another $500 million. So at this juncture, our estimated approximate deferred maintenance just for transportation infrastructure, again, just for the unincorporated county, which is what we oversee, is $1.5 billion with a B dollars. Now, we're very fortunate in that there was the SB1 Road Maintenance Rehabilitation Act monies that occurred, and there's also the local sales tax measure of Measure X that benefits the Transportation Agency of Monterey County, all the cities in the county, and thus that Measure X is a portion of revenue of which the county sees that is shared amongst all those other agencies. So of the portion that the county receives, some progress has been made over the years. Places that you can see such as River Road or the south part of Old Stage Road and other locations in the county. So some progress has been made, but every bit of revenue that can come the county's way could certainly help with that deferred maintenance of the county's roads and our overall road condition. As we move on to the next slide, it shows you some recent examples of using those same Measure X funds as mentioned for road purposes. On the left-hand side, you see the before pictures, and on the right-hand side, you see the after pictures of two different instances where Measure X dollars had been used, as well as some SB1. And what is possible out of additional revenue that could be used for roads could result in continued road rehab with this additional new funding. Moving on to the next slide. This is a map showing Monterey County, and in working with our engineering staff, these are a sample of some roads where if the sales tax measure were to pass and if funds become available for roads, these are some areas where that funding could be used to rehabilitate various county roads. We realize that there's probably many questions from the public that will come up, and so what we'd like to do is we would like to end our presentation here, introduce our next speaker, our Chief of Parks, Brian Flores, who oversees the parks of which I mentioned before.
Thank you, Director Ishii. Welcome, members of the public. Thank you for joining us tonight. If Karina could bring up the presentation, there we go. So I'm lucky enough to oversee the County of Monterey Parks and Lakes Division. It's a great job. Get to get out in nature and see all the wonders that we've all seen over the years. I'd like to first start off by just giving a little bit of background on what the County of Monterey Parks and Lakes Division entails. Our first county park opened in 1966, which was Royal Oaks Park up in North County, Monterey. Our last park that officially opened was Manzanita Park, which was also in North County, Monterey. Many of our park facilities, buildings, and campgrounds were built in the late 60s, early 70s, putting them at anywhere between 40, 50 years old. We manage over 30,000 acres of open space, surface water, and improved picnic areas within our parks. We have 5 day-use parks: Toro Park, Jack's Peak, Manzanita, Royal Oaks, and San Lorenzo Park. We have 2 lakes, Lake San Antonio and Lake Nacimiento. We have over 1,000 campsites at those locations. We also have the world-renowned racetrack Laguna Seca and the Laguna Seca Recreation Area. Hundreds of miles of trails encompass our parks. We have a number of historic structures, including the Tidball General Store and the Dutton Hotel, which is down in the Halone area of South County. We have the Laguna Seca Rifle and Pistol Shooting Range. We also have the Monterey County Agriculture and Rural Life Museum at San Lorenzo Park, which houses a number of antiquities and things from our past agriculture history, as well as a blacksmithing building, an old schoolhouse, and many tractors and irrigation equipment and things like that. We also have the Lake San Antonio North Shore equestrian area, which has a full equestrian ring and full kitchen and camping area. Unfortunately, we also have decades upon decades of deferred maintenance. Anywhere from $15 million of known deferred maintenance all the way up to $30 to $40 million of maintenance that we know is there and are still assessing. Next slide, please. With increased funding, we can increase our levels of service, which would be emergency response, quicker public safety response, more deferred maintenance projects could be completed. We could have a better guest experience by replacing picnic tables and fire rings and barbecues. Out of those 1,000 campsites, each one has a picnic table, a fire ring, a barbecue pit. Then we have all of our improved picnic areas that people rent out at our day use parks. All of those things have a lifespan of 5 to 10 years and need to be replaced often. We also would be able to increase our revenue from our guest serving facilities, such as our lodges down at Lake Nacimiento, our picnic sites, and our campgrounds. And we could also have more robust environmental protection at our parks. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, in 2020, we had one of the worst wildfires that Monterey County has seen. Actually started in Toro Park from a lightning strike. And over the past few years, we are still having effects from that fire. But it gave us some important tools to use and things to learn from about how we can make our parks more resilient in the face of natural disasters, such as flooding, winter storms, wildfires, and such. Some of these pictures detail some of the damages that have occurred over the past few years with our natural disasters. We would like to use additional funding for reforestation purposes, for better fuel management, for better trail management, getting goats in to do the great work that they do of eating down the overgrown bushes and vegetation, as well as helping us remove invasive species. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, if we can't take care of what we currently have, we can't make the necessary improvements that I think we'd all like to see in our parks. With additional funding, we can do things such as all-inclusive playgrounds, accessible trails, make improvements and upgrades to our camping areas, such as with glamping or putting in 50 amp electrical pedestals for RV camping. We can do new trails through areas of the park where people are not able to currently access. We could also put in outdoor amphitheaters, have outdoor entertainment, and also something near and dear to me, I would really love to get outdoor education programs going and facilities where homeschools and daycares and people can come and learn about our wonderful parks and environment. So with additional funding, we can take care of the deferred maintenance. We can have better response to our guests and help them have a better guest experience, as well as making necessary park improvements and recreation enhancements. So that wraps up my presentation, and I appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all our presenters for these insightful presentations. And now we're going to move into our question and answer portion of this evening. Our communications team has compiled the questions that have come in from the public. We've received some questions in advance as well, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible based on the time we have. If we do not get to your question, please know that we will respond to those questions and post them on our county website or in our social media platforms. So we do have a couple of questions that come in, and one is related to Public Works. So I want to give Randy enough time to unmute his mic, and also maybe Ezekiel, who might have input into this as well. So it says, of the 77 million allocated to roadway work, how much is for new construction?
This is an excellent question from the member of the public. There's also a lot that is packaged in that question. We must recognize that there are definitions of the kind of work that we do. And so when someone such as a public works official like myself sees the wording new construction, the state definition used by public works agencies for cities and counties, think of new construction under its definition by the state as constructing a new roadway where one did not exist before. That may not be the intent of the question, and so I'll go to the larger picture of the rehabilitation and replacement needs in that $77.8 million, thereabout, approximate number. So that call it $78 million figure is the annual budget that's shown in detail in the publicly available recommended budget book and adopted budget of the County of Monterey, available on the county website. And one would look to the annual work program for road fund, which fully describes, lists out, and gives the marching orders for the use of the county's dollars, again, for road fund purposes. A lot of that's funded by, as I mentioned before, gas tax, Measure X, or SB1, with some amount of transit occupancy tax that does come with it. Now, the $77 million figure, as I mentioned, has a lot packaged in it. And as you look at the detail in the annual work program for road fund, you'll see that there is the combination of maintenance activity done by maintenance crews. You'll see road rehabilitation work. You'll see work for local community streets, such as the community of Castroville, as an example. And you'll see traffic safety projects. And on top of those, you will see bridge projects. And so bridges, as well as some transportation safety projects, involve grants. And so the $77 million figure doesn't represent all the funding that comes to the roads every year. That's a reliable funding source. The 77 million represents all the grant funding that has come in to fund those bridge projects or highway safety projects. An example of those is the Robinson Canyon Road Bridge scour repair, which is a bridge out in Carmel Valley. And that is 2.1, call it $2.2 million, by and large of which is funded through federal grants. That's not, here again, a one-time funding source that went in through a grant. It's not part of the road fund revenue that comes in consistently. There's also the Hartnell Road Bridge Replacement Project just south of Salinas, and that's approximately $2.7 million. Here again, funded primarily through federal grants. There's some other safety projects that I mentioned, such as the Salinas and Pajaro Road Highway Safety Improvement Project funded project that's funded through, here again, a federal grant with a little bit of local match from the county itself. And what's important about all those grants I mentioned, which you'll see in that document, is largely funded through these one-time grants. Those one-time grants must have that funding applied for that specific purpose, for that specific project. So a bridge project that won bridge grant dollars cannot have the grant funding repurposed for something such as repaving a road. That would violate the terms of that grant. And so the grant funds must be used for those grant specific purposes. We mentioned the maintenance crews earlier, and for contextual purposes of that $77 million for this fiscal year, approximately somewhere around $13 million to $14 million is for funding the road maintenance crews for the everyday purpose of which they do of patching potholes, trimming trees, or providing emergency support for law enforcement and other first responders if there is a need for a road closure or for incident management. And so going from that point to where that leaves the balance, which is for road rehabilitation purposes, we have been trending around $15 million to $20 million of road rehabilitation work for the last several years. And here again, that's the balance once you take out all those other grant funded projects, as well as the standard ongoing maintenance activity done by just the employees themselves. And as a final point to put that into context for our members of the public, in this county, based on our bid canvases and the trends that we have seen and we've been cataloging, to chip seal a road or slurry seal a road, depending on the conditions of the road, it's been anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 per mile to do that. For repaving a road in this county, it has trended at around $1 million per mile. And to reconstruct a road, such as if you look at Harkins Road, just south of the city of Salinas, that came to a little bit north of $2 million per mile. So every bit of funding that comes to the road fund for road purposes certainly does help. We have over $700 million of road maintenance on just the roads. Every little bit helps towards accomplishing that goal of making our roads in a better condition. And I'll hand the floor back to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy, for that very thorough answer. Appreciate that. We have a question for Leanne. So the question is to confirm 911 gets that many calls, 1,964 calls daily just in Monterey County, or is that a stat including areas outside the county?
Thank you for the question. It is actually just for this department. There are other 911 departments in the county. So that was the average amount of calls that we took.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much for that, Leanne. Appreciate it. We have another question. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. It says, hi, you haven't really addressed the dire need at our Combo County City Animal Shelter. We need endless needs every day. More rescue animals need help. The Hitchcock staff works very hard to support by amazing, dedicated, passionate army of volunteers helping with all vital aspects of the shelter. What other county departments is so dependent on volunteer support? Please don't leave our non-human county residents out of the priority picture. We need access to space and availability at the old city shelter and much more. Let's see, you want to, Supervisor Church, you want to address the issue with animal shelters?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Sit on the board of directors for this JPA, which is what you call a joint powers agreement between the city of Salinas and the county of Monterey, as the questionnaire referred to. Questionnaire also asked what other county department may have so many volunteers, but I have a hunch we have quite a few of those in parks as well, if I recall. But obviously, the volunteers play a really huge role and running that shelter and helping us out down there. Animal services is underfunded. There's no doubt about that, and it is one of the priorities that has been raised by the Board of Supervisors. I did address that earlier when I was going through the list and came down to emergency services, for example, and we do need a lot of work in the shelter. We do need more animal control officers. We don't have an animal control officer for the weekends. That we have a fully staffed one there is really a desperate need, particularly in North County and South County. I know in my office we get calls from animals as well. I would say it's definitely one of the top 3 or 4 priorities, along with roads and other issues. So it's something that I am aware of sitting on that board and trying to help get as many resources as we can into it. And it's those animals aren't forgotten. Believe me, I have a dog. A lot of us have animals, and they're all part of a family to whoever they belong to. And I think we all realize they're really important.
Thank you, Supervisor Church, for that answer. And also for the person who asked the question, we do have other departments that utilize volunteers, including parks. Our Department of Emergency Management has volunteers with their neighborhood volunteers that help in time of disasters, as well as our Sheriff's Department. So many departments, actually social services as well, because there's a lot of educators that help social services with foster and adoption questions and support. So the county does utilize a number of volunteers.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that question. We have another question. What is the vision of the county for social and human services workforce, including services for seniors, people with disabilities, and working families and homeless individuals, mental health, and other vital programs for our community? Let's see.
That was the vision?
Yep.
I could speak to that. We actually have a coordination, and I think of the departments here, although this is very specific to the priorities that were addressed by Supervisor Church earlier, we do have a range of services that cross over to multiple departments. We do have a homelessness coordinator who serves from the county administrative office, and she actually participates with both the health department, social services, and multiple nonprofit organizations to address homelessness, but also other needs from folks within the community. Just yesterday, we had an update from our folks with the Alliance for Aging, and they were able to provide resources and some of the services that are being received by our community. In addition to that, we had quite a few people that were in our boardroom and sharing the different resources that are currently available and contacts that could be made with our nonprofit organizations. Some of those folks are not represented today as part of our panel, but certainly they are providing extraordinary services in the background. And anytime any of our folks here on this panel are actively responding to emergencies, those individuals are also with us and supporting through shelter, providing shelter or other health services to the folks that we have in temporary evacuation centers. And I'd be remiss to forget about our library. Our libraries actually are critical to our response as well, providing many of those resources. And just recently with power outages or folks that are coming in from the heat, folks are actually able to charge their phones and receive other services while they're on site at the library. So there's a lot of crossover within our multiple departments, and certainly social services is critical to those functions.
As a matter of fact, just this last week, the library in Carmel Valley played an important role with the Piney Fire and being a temporary evacuation point for residents there to get services and get refuge. So again, thank you very much, Sonia, for that. We have a question for our Department of Emergency Management. It's an interesting question. What does the Department of Emergency Management do when there isn't a disaster?
That's a really great question. It's one we actually often get. Well, so one of the things that we do is we manage and maintain the Monterey County Emergency Operations Plan, which is the governing document and is ratified by the Board of Supervisors, and essentially outlines the county's intentions and commitment to respond to natural disasters as well as technological and man-made disasters. And it outlines the roles and responsibilities of each of the agencies, what type of services they'll provide, what types of triggers are identified for activating those services, and who has authority to do what. It also outlines how we access state and federal resources in the event that we've exhausted all local resources, and essentially commits the county to the standardized emergency management system within California, as well as the National Incident Management System federally and nationwide. We have approximately, I believe, 13 annexes to the emergency operations plans that are hazard focused. And then a handful that are specific response capability focused, such as our care and shelter plan, our coastal incident response plan. We have a tsunami response plan. We have our earthquake plan. We have a debris removal plan. And it really outlines the full breadth of services that the county provides, not just within the Department of Emergency Management, but with all county agencies and external partners as well. We also do a lot of community outreach. So you'll
Looks like Kelsey's connection may have frozen. We'll give her a second to come back. Okay, we officially got the nod from our IT support folks that Kelsey's signal is frozen. So we'll hope she'll reestablish that connection here shortly.
I'm not sure what happened.
All right, well, you're back with us.
No, we provide a lot of educational outreach, but one of the most important things that we do is we administer the emergency alert and warning system. So the reverse 911 system that allows people to receive emergency information about threats or hazards near their homes, school, businesses, and what to do in those particular events. So with that, and I'm so sorry for the technical difficulty, I'll give it back to you.
All right, thank you, Kelsey, and great recovery. It's a part of your work in recovery, so wonderful. We do have another question that came in for you, Kelsey, at the Department of Emergency Management, and maybe for Randy as well. This could be maybe a combo question, but how do we ensure our infrastructure is resilient to potential ocean-based disasters such as tsunamis and hurricanes? And either Randy or Kelsey can.
I can't really speak to hurricanes, but I can speak to coastal incidents as well as tsunamis. So we have, as I mentioned, 2 plans that outline our response capabilities, but we really do serve as a coordinating agency in terms of the actual immediate response. In terms of risk reduction, we coordinate with the municipal jurisdictions who have jurisdictional authority over their coastline. And we also work with regulatory agencies as well as public works in areas in the incorporated area along the coastline to not just reinforce infrastructure, but also to protect the natural environment as well. So with that, I'll actually hand it over to Randy because he actually does the work. I just talk about him doing the work.
Thank you, Kelsey. And this was an excellent question from a member of the public. When disasters occur, which we do not prefer, but they do occur, and the reality is we need to contend with them, we do our best to incorporate resilient measures or hazard hazard mitigation measures in the projects. So sometimes when a road fails in a heavy wet weather event or an atmospheric river, oftentimes it's because the culvert was too small, i.e. the pipe was too small to handle that amount of flow. So when we repair that road that becomes damaged from those high intensity rainfall events, they're replaced with modern day materials of county standard size, and oftentimes we're incorporating other mitigation measures such as a concrete inlet or smooth inlet, or in fire recovery areas where we incorporate a pre-filtration system to separate out various mud flows that tend to come down from what we call denuded or completely burned away areas that have no more grasses growing on them. And thus this pre-treatment system prevents that mud from getting inside of the pipe, which would invariably clog the pipe and cause even more damage to the road if, in fact, the pipe were not even there in the first place. So those are hazard mitigation measures that get incorporated post-disaster. And so we're oftentimes doing that as part of disaster recovery and response work. We are looking for grants through our partners over at Housing Community Development, HCD, and others to find other projects that could be done to prevent additional damages to our infrastructure if there is a disaster event of different kinds. So those are just a small sample of what could be done during fire recovery events and winter storm recovery events.
Great. Thank you, Randy. And then even just a couple weeks ago, after the earthquake a few miles away, you guys went out and checked bridges and all the other things throughout the county. So that's an ongoing effort on the part of the Department of Public Works, Facilities, and Parks. Looks like Randy just froze as well. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. And these are again for the Department of Emergency Management. So Kelsey, we got you on the hot seat again. The question is, how do local agencies coordinate with state and federal authorities during natural disasters?
That's a really great question. So as the Monterey County Operational Area Authority, we serve as a broker between the municipal jurisdictions and the state for disaster resources. And so that's part of the standardized emergency management system. And this is really a flexible system depending on the scale of the emergency. So we're always mindful that we want to respond in a way that is commensurate with the threat or hazard that we're experiencing. So we wouldn't necessarily call FEMA for a single structure fire per se. And so one of the things that we do as the operational authority is we evaluate the risk, evaluate the impact to the community, and work with our municipal jurisdictions to gather damage estimates so that we can report those to the state and to FEMA so that we can meet thresholds for qualifying for certain levels of state or federal disaster. And so it's important for us to have positive and ongoing relationships with our municipal jurisdictions prior to an emergency so that they know how to best access the system. Once a disaster kicks off, we actively engage through our liaison officer to make sure that they have the resources that they need to serve their community and where the county might be able to support them in developing further services. And when both the local jurisdiction and the county resources are exhausted, we serve as that broker to access and request state resources, and the state serves as the broker between the municipal jurisdiction and the county with the federal government to access federal resources. And so it's really a chain of events and a very well-established system in which we have to leverage effectively our relationships and effective communication to ensure that everyone has clear and effective access to local, state, and federal resources.
Terrific. Thank you, Kelsey. And I have a few more questions for you. So this is concerning protecting vulnerable populations during such events. What measures are in place, and how does the Department of Emergency Management help to ensure those populations are taken care of?
That's a really great question. So prior to a disaster, we actually do a community evaluation. We send out multiple surveys to get community input about where they think they're most vulnerable, what resources would be of value to them. But we also look at census data. We look at income, we look at property value, we look at risk probability and impact, and identify vulnerable populations in advance of the disaster so that we can target outreach and preparedness initiatives prior to the disaster in those most vulnerable communities. We do have a very large county, so we're not often able to get to everyone in one year, but we do make a concerted effort to ensure that we're providing access to those vulnerable communities who might not be intimately aware of how the county works. They might not be intimately aware of how we communicate. And so we're extremely mindful of that potential communication and resource gap prior to a disaster, so that when we move into a response to an incident, we're leveraging resources effectively so that the communities who need the resources are, in fact, receiving the resources and able to access them in a fair and equitable way. One of the things that we've done that's very exciting to me is we've included an access and functional needs unit within the Emergency Operations Center, meaning we have somebody who is purely dedicated to ensuring that all government disaster services are accessible for any person with a access or functional need or disability. We also have an equity officer in our command staff. And what that means is we have somebody dedicated to looking at how our services are being received and where they're being served. And if those populations might need us to deviate from what we would normally do so that they can more readily access those services. We look at language accessibility, not just in our emergency alerts, but also in our press conferences. And we look at what types of long-term recovery needs might be needed in that community. If there's a need to access a commodity point of distribution by foot because of lack of transportation, those are all things that we consider in how, when, where, and why we provide disaster services.
Outstanding, Kelsey. And then I might add that we were also one of the first counties ever to do press conference in Indigenous language. So we are totally committed to those populations for sure. Another question for you, Kelsey. So hang in there. And maybe you can answer this kind of briefly about drills and simulations. Obviously, I know we prepare those all the time. If you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the Monterey County EOC actively exercises at least once a year, which is very exciting. And what that means is not that we're running around the building getting our daily exercise. It means that we simulate a disaster occurring in the county. Staff develop an exercise over the course of a year. And they develop a scenario, they develop impacts, they identify what we call injects, and then we bring everyone into a room or into the Emergency Operations Center, and we simulate that disaster occurring. I think there's an episode of it on Parks and Rec, actually, that's actually a really good example of what it's like with the little vests and the different scenarios. And so an example of this actually is this past summer, we actively engaged with our partners down in San Luis Obispo County and simulated the potential failure of the Diablo nuclear power plant and how the counties would respond individually, but also collectively as a group. And we practiced that scenario. This coming winter, we are practicing a scenario of a potential dam failure, which is highly improbable and will never happen. But in the event that it may occur one day very far from now, and most likely not at all, we will be actively prepared to respond to that particular event. And it's very exciting. We get a lot of disaster service workers into the building. They learn new skills. They practice old skills. We introduce new staff. We bring in staff who have been doing this for a very long time and know the ropes. And we do a lot of cross-training to prepare people for potential disaster.
That's terrific. And not to mention the fact that most of us here at the county on the call tonight are engaged in training on an ongoing basis. So terrific. Thank you, Kelsey. Another question, and I'm going to try to roll two questions into one. One of the questions deals with the disaster response and how do we improve on our response after an event occurs. And then also the other question talks about partnerships, and they kind of go hand in hand, and partnerships with other agencies or other organizations in our county.
Yeah, so actually by state mandate, we are required to conduct an after-action review after every, I believe, EOC activation. And we really like to have an environment of we can always learn from what we did. Nothing will ever be perfect, and we can always improve. We're already coming in behind the curve when a disaster hits. And so we're dealing with a lot of challenges that are very difficult, typically not enough resources, not enough time, not enough information. And so we're constantly evaluating what we did, how we did it, and how can we do better. And so that after action review is a really candid conversation with staff about things they thought we did well and things they thought we could improve upon. And then what was the second part of the question?
Partnerships with other organizations that help us focus on disaster relief and recovery.
Yeah, so we are constantly engaging with our partners and seeing where we can change services or improve services or create services. And so we look to our partner agencies actually to inform us about what they need in a disaster so that we can tailor our services to best accommodate them. We provide a customer service not just for the community, but for our first responder partners. And we try to create work plans that tackle those challenges.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to see so much interest in emergency management. That's great. All right, our next question is directed at our Chief of Parks, Chief Flores. You mentioned the needs for county parks, and the question is about things that the listener didn't hear, and that is increased staffing, perhaps by park rangers who can monitor how parks are used or abused in this case. And construction of mountain bike trails and the like. So can you talk about some of those needs that you didn't get to in your presentation that would be useful and helpful to not only the parks, but our community?
Sure. Thanks, Nick. Yes, I completely agree with the person who asked the question. We do need more staffing. Our Parks Division now is a very different Parks Division than it was just less than 10 years ago when it was an actual Parks Department. At that time, staffing was 30 to 40% greater than what it is today. Through retirements and people moving on and such, our staffing numbers have gone down. With additional funding, we would be able to start staffing back up. We can only do so much with the staff that we have, and you can only go so far and do more with less. It only goes so far. Speaking specifically to our armed law enforcement park rangers who do patrol our trails and roads and campsites and lakes, we do need more rangers, specifically in North County. We were lucky to be able to get a North County Ranger last budget year, and we got another one this year. We are currently in recruitment for 2 additional Rangers, one for South County, one for North County. The county has purchased 2 Enduro motorcycles for our North County Rangers to patrol the backcountry area. When you look at Toro Park, it's roughly 6,000 acres. It's impossible for one ranger to be everywhere all at one time. And given that park has 8 to 10, I don't want to call them illegal entrances, but entrances where you can get into the park. People can come in there, and we do have issues with young individuals and adults riding motorcycles through the open space where it's not allowed. There is illegal, trail construction. When we find those, we try to do the environmental remediation to, so we don't have erosion issues. But I couldn't agree more that we do need more staffing. With additional staffing, we would be able to, provide better service to our guests, better environmental protection. The Rangers also now have electric bicycles, e-bikes, so they're able to get out there on the trails and interact with our park users and guests and talk to them about, safe passing, what to do when you encounter a horse on a trail or a hiker. about watching downhill speeds, about staying on trails, things like that. So I couldn't agree more. We definitely need more staff in our county parks to provide greater service so we can start making these needed improvements and take care of these maintenance projects.
Thank you, Brian. And there was another question that came after that one, almost on the same vein with regard to trail builders and people taking advantage of burn scar areas and things of that nature. So obviously, this is a priority for you, and you're well aware of that need. And of course, the park rangers are the eyes and ears for the Parks Division in many, many ways. All right, let's go on to another question, and then we're going to move to our closing comments for our last question this evening. With regard to parks again, what would happen if the deferred maintenance projects at county parks were not able to be addressed?
Well, we learned during COVID that parks and our parks employees were essential workers. Where did everybody go during the lockdowns? They went to parks. E-bike purchases exploded. People were out in the parks. The parks were, I was at work every single day, and in the midst of that, we had a wildfire and it shut down one of our largest parks for about 8 months. But people need to get out in parks. In fact, there's a program, an international program called Park RX, where doctors actually prescribe people to get out into parks for their health and well-being. Going out into nature, experiencing the outdoors reduces stress, reduces anxiety, can be treatment for mental health disorders. And they're gathering places, especially when we're talking about our homeless issue and our housing issues. Where do you go if your family is 30 people for Easter? You go to the park. Easter is our busiest day at the park. We actually have to close the park gates because our parks fill up. I celebrated like that when I was a kid. Our family was so large that nobody's house was big enough to hold a 4th of July celebration or a birthday or a quinceañera. We had to go to the park. So what would happen if we didn't take care of these deferred maintenance projects and we weren't able to keep the sanitation systems up and running, the bathrooms clean and open, the picnic tables replaced, and the barbecue pits replaced? Unfortunately, we'd be forced to close some of these areas. It's not uncommon. It happens throughout park districts and counties and states across the nation. Parks are not self-sustaining. There's only, out of the 250 approximately state parks in California, only 6 can support themselves with the revenue that they bring in. Everything else is general fund supported. National parks are general fund supported. Our county and local parks are general fund supported. Parks are not self-sufficient, but they are necessary for healthy, thriving communities. And it would break my heart if we had to close any of our facilities or parks due to lack of funding.
Thank you, Brian, for that very powerful answer. We're going to take our last question of the evening before we have our closing remarks. So we have a question here. It says, are there plans to enhance community engagement and transparency in the budget process? And how will changes in state and federal funding impact our county budget this year? Mr. Vega, can you help address that question for us?
Yes, in terms of transparency, the County of Monterey offers various opportunities for the public to get engaged so that they get informed about the budget process itself. So I think it is always important to have those opportunities. Last fiscal year, we had the opportunity to meet at different groups of the community for different districts and also a county-wide meeting as well. When it comes to the federal and state funding, I think it is hard to tell what the impacts could be, but if there is an indication of what occurred last fiscal year, when the state of California was projecting a significant deficit that was impacting them, we saw that a lot of those impacts will eventually trickle down to our community. So what we do is that we evaluate what the state budget is proposing. In January, we look at various aspects of those proposals for the budget. Then we determine by collaborating with the different departments in the county how those changes could impact their operations. So eventually, when funding at the state level starts to have challenges, or when the state starts to have challenges and having deficits, that ultimately will translate to the county. We don't have anything specific at the moment that indicates what those potential impacts will be, but we do know that when those deficits start occurring at the state level, that those deficits also translate into reduced funding at the local level. And as I said, currently we do not have specific amounts because we don't have anything specific for this year, but we will be watching what happens at the state and federal level. And then as we review that information, we will take appropriate action to provide information to the board of supervisors and the public as to what those potential impacts could be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And also, if I could add to that, for the public that's interested in engaging, we certainly have plenty of opportunities. If you like us on Facebook and Instagram, we always post our public meetings and special meetings, including those that supervisors have in their own districts, as well as any kind of special meetings. As Mr. Vega mentioned, we do publicize the budget hearings and whatnot tremendously. We also utilize community calendars to post our meetings and our opportunities for public engagement. So we're happy to engage with you anytime, and you can always email us at pr@countyofmonterey.gov if you'd like more information, or if you'd like to sign up for our email list. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Sonia De La Rosa, our County Administrative Officer, who's going to provide some closing comments and some retrospective.
I really want to thank all of you for joining us today, and all of our panelists for sharing a little bit about what your different departments do. These are really just a glimpse at the many services that are provided by the county employees and the resources that come into the county. These are all priorities, and there's so much more that goes into what the county does. Our sheriff's department representatives had to leave, but they're one element of the many resources that we provide across the county in partnership with our state and our federal representatives and other local jurisdictions. We certainly cannot do it alone. A lot of questions were focused on our emergency response, and in every emergency response, we have representatives from across the state that will come and assist, just as we are readily available to assist them in their time of need. Much of the focus that we have is in responding to situations regionally when it comes to disaster response, but also when it comes to how we serve in our communities. And we certainly work with each other, engage with each other, see what other counties and communities are doing, and trying to improve the way we do business. But in a lot of instances, we are also sharing much of what we're doing in our county and much of the innovation that's been put in place by our staff and by our community members, where they identify this is where you could do a little bit better. This is where you're excelling, and the ability to share openly with the community. I know there's been questions in terms of the budget and how it's allocated. It is very much a learning process. We encourage you to listen in and to watch videos that are posted about our process, because it does take a little bit to understand how the resources are shared in our community. Many of the dollars that come to the county are already earmarked by the funding authority as to how they could be spent. Many of the grants are that same way. Our general fund is our dollars that have a little bit more discretion as to how we can spend those. And many of the folks that spoke today are departments that are funded with these general fund dollars. And the unfortunate thing is that there are limits, of course, to what those dollars, where we could expand those dollars. And so really just understanding the range of services that we provide in the community. And when there is a disaster, our services do not stop. We still continue to provide services, but with the added charge of helping our communities recover from these disasters. And I know Kelsey mentioned resiliency, but also importance of being prepared for emergencies. having your go bag ready, having, not waiting for an event to occur, but actually being prepared. And Kelsey's team does that, you know, in trying to support our communities, but also, all of you are able to assist in that way as well. In terms of, you know, community need, I know we engage with many of our nonprofits to try to identify, resources in our community that are needed. We'd like to still continue to hear from you, and that'll help us again serve our communities even better. I also just want to take the time to thank all of the folks that have come out and assisted us during emergencies and during events. Our contractors certainly did not skip a beat. They are readily available to assist us when the Public Works Department goes out on the street. And when we have issues in our parks, they're ready to come and support us in any way that they can. And especially our partners at CAL FIRE and all of the fire districts within our community. Again, we're funded very differently, but when it comes to an emergency response or a response to an urgent need, there's no hesitation on their part. So truly, there is a partnership in all that we do, and it is an honor to be able to serve all of you, and again, to be able to evolve with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sonia. And I want to make a special thanks to our team at County Information Technology Department for helping us stay live tonight. Despite the few technical issues we had in the beginning, we apologize for that, but that's the nature of live broadcasts. So thank you to our IT team. Thank you to our communications team. Thank you to our county administrative office and the support team there. And especially, I want to thank the members of the public who joined us this evening. You took the time out of your busy day to learn more about your county government and the priorities that our Board of Supervisors have set. Your engagement is invaluable to us, and we want you to stay engaged so we can continue to shape the future of the County of Monterey together. This program has been recorded and will be rebroadcast on our county YouTube channel, as well as our county Facebook page. And we invite you to, if you don't like us on Facebook, to please click that like button. You can also find us on Instagram as well. And a number of other departments, including our 911 folks and our health department, have their own social media. And we invite you to also engage with them on their social media, because that's how we truly stay connected. So on behalf of the County of Monterey and on our elected officials and our entire staff, I want to thank you all very much for being with us this evening. I'm Nick Pasculi, the County Communications Director, and I wish you a good evening. Thanks, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.